Donald Trump is not
very important, passionate words in your message. Both of you have been champions and very strong advocates for working families and working people. You've shared your stories, Senator, your parents, your father, a shorter cook, Governor, your mother, who would bring in boarders to help pay for the rent. Tell us about why and how those experiences that you had with your families, with your parents, shape the type of leaders that you are today.
Well, I'd love you to start, because you just triggered something. I remember I had the privilege of being on a Zoom with the senator. He wasn't senator at the time, and I knew something he didn't. He thought he was getting an interview. I already had made a decision, but about the Senate seat. And we just started talking. And then both of us found ourselves tearing up, talking about our parents, particularly you talking about your father and your journey. And if there was any hesitation, there wasn't. That was the imprint, the why, and what separates the character, the quality of the individual from the politician. And I'm saying this, I'm in the right audience, is someone so connected to this larger cause, but no one with the kind of character of this person that I had the privilege of appointing. And that character was shaped, that imprint, from your parents and your remarkable personal journey.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you. I think that the two things that come to mind on your question, Erica, are number one, yeah, my parents, my dad was a short order cook, my mom used to clean houses, very honest work, hard work, and seeing their constant, daily struggle, sacrifice. They always made it very clear, right? Life was not easy, but they were doing what they did, not for their own benefit, but so that my sister, my brother, and I could have better opportunity, right? The definition of the American dream, have the next generation have it better. But to see the daily work that it took to try to create those opportunities leaves that impact, because it's so indicative of most families across the country. Maybe your first generation, maybe your family's been here for 10 generations. Like, the goal is still work hard, play by the rules, try to get ahead. And I think added to that were the constant experiences and storytelling of how many of my uncles were still in Mexico, or how many of my cousins were still in Mexico, the connection to where we're from, pride in where we're from, but building a life here. Yeah. So you take those two together, and again, that perspective of life ain't always easy, nor should it always be guaranteed to be easy, but it should be fair. Yeah. And the American dream needs to stay within reach. Right now, there's a lot of attention on things are just way too expensive, and they are, but beyond just being expensive, they're just hard. You know, access to health care, college admissions, just all the things that we thought were basic are just too hard these days.
Yeah, I think about, I had the privilege of a remarkable young woman, 19, she's pregnant, 21, 2, separated, single mom at 23, raising 2 kids, came from nothing. Her father committed suicide in a pretty raw way. He was a prisoner of war, corregidor for almost 4+ years during World War II, came back a different guy. And so that shaped her life. And of course, by definition, she shaped my life. I watched her, just the grit, the hard work, never complaining, never explaining away things, just her example. Single moms, the bedrock. I mean, hats off to all the single moms out there grinding for their kids every single day. And what a gift. What an example. But, you know, I also saw the human toll of that, the human struggle, the stress that so many folks are going through. And, you know, I remember her talking about 52 paychecks don't work anymore. It's 104. And how it was just getting by, not getting ahead. And I think that goes to the foundation, the story that the senator is talking about, the story that is our lives today, that the old bargain is dead. You know, the new one's waiting to be rewritten. I say it all the time. I believe it as someone who's been deeply involved in the fight for democracy, for our republic, and the fight that brought us to redistricting and the fight here with Proposition 50 in California, that we cannot save our democracy unless we democratize our economy. It is foundational, the struggles of working families, not just working moms, what's happening in this country. The old bargain is dead, and AI is going to finish it off. And we need to wake up to that foundational reality.
So let's talk a little bit more about that. The data tell us that for the first time, people feel like the generation coming after them may not be better off, may not have their piece of the American dream. Can you both share some thoughts with us, room full of public policymakers, and tell us about the role you think public policy leaders can do to help shape the next version of the American dream that people, I think, still aspire to, certainly in our community?
Well, look, 10% of people own 2/3 of the wealth in this nation. That same 10% own 93% of the stock market. 30-year-old today is doing worse than his or her parents for the first time in U.S. history. If that's not a 5-alarm fire, I don't know what the hell is. We were sitting there, some of us at least, celebrating the best of Roman Republic, Greek democracy on July 4th. You know, the vision of our founding fathers, co-equal branches of government, co-equal branches of government, popular sovereignty, rule of law. But I'm reminded, thinking about the Greeks, there was a guy around 50 AD, 2,000 years ago, warning the Athenians, Plutarch. He said, the imbalance between the rich and the poor is the oldest and most fatal ailment of all republics. Think about that. 2,000 years ago, there was warning the Athenians that the imbalance between the rich and the poor. And fast forward today, the first trillionaire is minted. At the same time, we have 20 states still paying $7.25 an hour. Something's fundamentally broken here. And that wealth is creating power locking in rules and regulations, locking everybody else out. You can't play in the margins anymore. We can't fail more efficiently. Certainly, nostalgia is not working. I would argue socialism not going to work. But capitalism as we know it doesn't work either. And so when we talk about rewriting, or at least renegotiating this social contract and rewriting it as authors, not consumers, we have to fundamentally understand that it's broken and we cannot play in the margins any longer. And we can talk about those prescriptions. That's perhaps another conversation. But I think foundationally, folks now get it. We can no longer argue, again, to fail more efficiently. It's time for order of magnitude change in terms of how we approach the American dream, how we approach here in California, the California dream.
So before we took the stage, I was sharing with the governor a little bit my experience from my time on the board, my time as president, and part of Naleo's strength, what makes it unique, and what I love about Naleo, right? It's not just federal officials and issues, it's not just state officials and issues, it's not just local officials and issues, it's everything. And by the way, it's not Democrat or Republican, it's nonpartisan, it's us coming together. And I lay that out because you ask about policy. Yeah. And there's a lot of policies, ideas, and solutions that are out there. But you can't have a policy conversation and not have a political conversation at the same time. And so here's my practical reality. Factual, not partisan. You have a president of the United States who's constantly abusing his power and constantly overreaching. You have a Supreme Court judiciary broadly, but the Supreme Court especially, who may have gotten it right on the birthright citizenship case, barely, but on others has continued to give this chief executive more and more power over federal government and federal employees. And you have Congress, a separate but co-equal branch of government, whose current majority is failing to live up to its job. So I would love to get back to the place where we can have that debate of ideas and solutions. We're not there right now. We got political work to do. We got political work to do for the next 112 days to at least restore a check and balance in Congress. And then, whether it's January of 2027 or January of 2029, let's be ready with the playbook, because this administration came in with a playbook called Project 2025. So that's the work we need to be doing right now, the organizing, the mobilizing, the getting out the vote, and in the meantime, putting those policy solutions and plans in place so we hit the ground running as soon as we turn this political ship around.
Yeah. And I said it was code red for that 30-year-old that's not doing better than his or her parents. It's a 5-alarm fire. What's happening to our democracy? It's a corruption story, the Trump administration. I think Senator is being generous here. I mean, it's not the rule of law anymore. It's the rule of dawn. I hope it's dawned on everybody what's going on in this country, what's going to happen Thursday night, primetime speech, what happened in Fulton County, what's happening all across the United States, what happened here, 10 minutes from where we are as we speak, at the Democracy Center in Little Tokyo, here in the state of California. Just last year, not that many months ago, we had 1,000 community leaders, faith-based leaders, folks from every political stripe coming together because they wanted to fight fire with fire and save and preserve our democracy. Folks couldn't get into the event because there were masked men that were standing outside. A guy who looked like he came off the Burbank lot in a 1930s movie, dressed up accordingly by the name of Bovino. Greg Bovino was there. No ID. No one recognizing what agency they work for. We said at the time it was a preview of things to come. Just as we said, after 4,000 of our National Guard were federalized, 700 active duty Marines were not sent overseas. They were sent right here in LA, the second largest city in the United States of America. I will never forget, on Election Day last year, on Election Day, the BORTAC teams, these are the Border Patrol Tactical Units, the Apache helicopters, these guys all dressed up as if they're going into a military operation. They were staged before the polls opened right in front of Dodger Stadium in order to send a message to our diverse communities: you may not want to show up and elect and vote. These guys are not screwing around. Donald Trump is not screwing around. He does not believe in fair and free elections. We will lose our country if we do not take back the House of Representatives. No more important race in our lifetime than getting Speaker Jeffries that gavel this November. None, in my perspective.
Senator Padilla, when you were Secretary of State, you did an extraordinary job expanding access to the ballot box and making elections and democracy in California stronger. Can you share with this room full of elected officials, and I know that we have several dozen election administrators from small local communities, what is the work before us in strengthening democracy? How are local officials the front line to rebuilding trust between communities and their government?
No, I appreciate the question. And by the way, you don't just have to be an elections administrator to be in this business, because whether you're a county official, you have a say over how elections are run in your jurisdiction. If you're a state legislator, you can change the laws in your state to make it not just safe and secure, because elections are, but voter friendly, just accessible. That's what voting rights are fundamentally about. When I'm debating in committee or on the floor of the Senate, my colleagues across the aisle talk a lot about, we need to make it easier to vote but harder to cheat. Right? We got the harder to cheat part down. Every study, every audit, every report, every review shows voter fraud is exceedingly rare. There's zero evidence of the massive voter fraud that Trump and his allies want you to believe. That's fact. Where we have failed is not making it easy enough to vote for a lot of people across the country. I like to think California is the gold standard. Working with Governor Newsom when I was Secretary of State, we made the changes to automatically send every registered voter a ballot by mail. Vote by mail is safe and it's secure and it's very convenient. Imagine that. But we also went a step further, because my dad was not a fan of vote by mail. He wanted to see the ballot go in the box with his own eyes. Yeah. But there's better in-person options too, right? Flexibility anywhere within your county, not just on one day, but over the course of multiple days, in-person early voting, ballot drop boxes. Like, the playbook is there. Proven safe, proven secure, proven accessible. That's what fundamental voting rights and strong voting rights are all about. So for people from other parts of the country, you want the playbook, come see me after the show.
But the playbook's there on the other side. I didn't finish the story about the last election here in California. Donald Trump, the morning of the election, after he sent out the board tack teams, also sent out on Truth Social, said the election was rigged. Before the polls were open, the election was rigged. Not only did he do that, he sent out the week prior the Department of Justice to do the monitoring to assess and prove the theory. What did he do right after the elections? He then filed lawsuits, hoping to get to the Supreme Court, saying he had proof that the election was rigged. Of course, this was all after trying to purge our voting rolls. Had we not sued, that would have happened. This guy is not screwing around. That's the playbook on the other side. What's Thursday night's primetime speech all about? It's part of the playbook. To cast doubt, anxiety, to set up the terms of the debate that will occur in and around next year's elections. We will see masked men in and around those elections. We'll see the intimidation of the voting strategies. We've seen it on vote by mail, suggesting somehow voting by mail, as the senator rightfully suggests, somehow that is corruption in plain sight. He believes in one thing: competitive authoritarianism. He wants the pretense of an election, just like Putin does as well. 87.3%. Putin, 4% for the runner-up. That's the republic that Trump is trying to advance. So that's the playbook we're up against. And so I want to just express gratitude in the spirit of your recognition of those local elected officials. You are on the front lines of these battles. As important as senators and governors and mayors and the rest are, perhaps nothing more important than the integrity of our Secretary of State and our county election officials. And so I just want to express gratitude, respect, and appreciation, because I know what you're up against, and I know how foundational that is to the fate and future of not just our democracy, but again, the spirit that defines this organization and the work you do every single day.
Let me mention one more thing, I think, for your political consideration. Yes. Because as another example of how times are different. When I was Secretary of State, we'd have our huddles and our planning sessions, and what if this happened, what if that happened, but we'd always wonder whether we should share certain concerns publicly or not, because we didn't want to scare people into thinking, well, if my vote's not going to count, should I even bother to vote? We don't have that luxury anymore, because the other side is lying, conspiracy theories, attacks, you name it. So we have to inform ourselves and inform our constituents, inform the public of what the threats are, because they're hearing about it. They need to know that there's those of us willing to defend voting rights and what we're doing to be ready. So if this conversation is making anybody here uncomfortable, I get it, but we have to embrace it and embrace the challenge and continue to do the work for not just the next 112 days, because we're going to have some challenges before the election, we're going to have some challenges on Election Day, and we're going to have challenges after Election Day during the vote counting process if 2016 and 2020 and 2024 are any indicator.
Well, gentlemen, thank you for being here, for sharing your thoughts on behalf of NALEO and the NALEO Educational Fund Board.
Thank you.
We're grateful.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for being out here in California.
Yes.
By the way,
One last item.
Senator.
One last item, point of personal privilege. As a former president of NALEO,
Right.
talking about issues, talking about leadership, we thank the governor for being here. Long-term challenge for all of us when we get a chance to come up for air. one of the things that we should start talking about within the Naleo family a little bit more is how to not just document, but to tell our stories. The primary reason, this is Padilla talking, why our community is the target right now is because Trump and the forces around him have succeeded in trying to other us. When I made reference to they're trying to decide not just who gets to vote and who doesn't, who gets to be an American and who doesn't. We need to make sure our stories are ingrained not just within our communities, but across the country, because we are Americans too. And today at 4 o'clock, there's going to be a screening of a film called Into the Fire that tells a very important story. The story of former city council member, former state assembly member, former member of the House of Representatives, Tony Cardenas. Make your way up to the ballroom. I'm in the movie.
Thank you, gentlemen.